Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about uncomfortable feedback. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, have you ever had to give uncomfortable feedback to one of your engineers and how did it help them? Well, I have, and usually I do it in a two-step process. Well, technically it's three steps. It's just that they usually by the time we get to step three, they're already getting fired, or like someone's being replaced. Either I'm getting fired, or I'm gonna get moved, or they're gonna get moved, or they're gonna get fired. But the first two steps are usually the same, and it helps in different ways. So one of the things that is very ingrained into office culture in my region at the very least, which is one of those things where I've done a lot of work with different countries, and office culture differs a lot from different cultures. If you work with international companies, and so there's usually two approaches where you have the I'm not sure what the English word would be for it, but I think the passiveness maybe of the Swedes or the Scandinavian. It's not. I wouldn't go as far as to saying that all the Scandinavians are the same way, because my cousins in Denmark are known for being a little bit more outspoken than we here than the the people in Sweden. But the main differences are usually how you approach feedback, conflicts, discussions, etc., etc. Where the Swedes are a lot more passive usually in the way we communicate in these sorts of situations. In other words, we are very, we'll attempt to the greatest extent possible to assume ignorance and to try to be diplomatic, to try to not cause friction, etc., in everything that is being done, like any discussion that is possible. We try and sort of think the best about people, even when it's sort of insane, where it's like it gets to the point where someone can actually be misbehaving to a fairly severe point, and we will you still don't really get firm with them because it's a little bit taboo to do that. And the opposite is that people are very direct. They will tell you exactly how they feel about things, and like they're very outspoken, etc., etc. Now, the way that I usually think about this is that it's the carrot stick thing, basically, where I make the argument that it's very easy to start with carrot, or to be soft with someone, and to communicate the right thing, be soft with them, and then turn over to lean more and more towards stick when it's necessary. You can kind of scale up the pressure when necessary, but it's very difficult to start with full stick, or like be like fairly firm with people and then scale over to being softer with people. So it's sort of different approaches. And one of the best ways that I've found to give uncomfortable feedback to a specific engineer is to start out with not singling anybody out within my team. So an example would be if I've had a few incidents where I know who has done something. I know, so I've observed a specific engineer doing something in the code review, or I've seen they're conducting themselves in the company in a certain way that is not really, well, it's not the way that the company wants to do things. And in this scenario, I'm the tech lead, which means that I have to sort of make sure that that doesn't happen. And so I start the conversation by saying, well, guys, and I address everybody in the team. I've had some complaints, or I've noticed that some of us are doing this and that. It's a very, again, you sort of try to relate. You say to them like, yeah, you understand sort of where this is happening, but unfortunately we can't do that because of these reasons. And then you sort of motivate why this is a bad thing, and you ask everybody to give their feedback on it. And usually there might be some discussion, and if everything goes smoothly, the people, like everybody, sort of are aware of it. The benefit of having this more passive approach, in my opinion at the very least, is that you haven't you haven't sort of lost your cool. You haven't like singled out a specific individual. You haven't like created a friction between different coworkers, because everybody, the people who can't relate to the statement, they will sort of ignore what I'm saying. But the people who can sort of relate, they're going to quietly realize that, oh, this applies to me, without me having to actually say directly, oh, it was Bob or it was Jane who did this, you should stop doing this, sort of thing, right? Now, in some cases, that's step number one. In some cases, usually this solves the entire issue. They benefit, like they sort of fix the issue, or they raise that. In some cases, it's actually really fun, because they mention like that. Oh yeah, I've probably done this myself, and that actually gives them an opportunity to sort of raise their hand and admit that, yeah, I've probably done this a few times, even though I know that this was the person. But they're very transparent and honest and say, yeah, it's because I don't understand this, or I'm not so good with this, or I feel uncomfortable in those situations. And all of a sudden, the entire team starts to actually benefit from this, because now one of their coworkers put themselves out there a little bit in front of everybody, and that usually has a very positive bonding experience type of thing going for the rest of the team, which it now turns into a positive thing, rather than because if I go directly doing the stick thing immediately to the person, especially if you never do that in front of other people if you can avoid it, you single people out in a very different way. You isolate the person, and that sort of nullifies most of the benefits that could have happened if everybody sort of starts seeing each other as one individual in this community very tiny little community, right? So that's number one. Number two is, let's say that this doesn't work. Let's say that the pattern keeps on repeating, and I've mentioned it a few times, and I start to see that, all right, I'm not going to be able to reach the person in this fluffier, like non-confrontational way. Then we're going to have a conversation, me and them, which is sort of the standard. You go and sit down and you talk to them. I've seen that these things are happening. Could you tell me a little bit about why you're doing this, or like why this is happening? You don't even have to say, why are you doing this? You can make it very soft and say, this is what we're trying to do. Can you share your thoughts a little bit on how you would like things to work? Because it seems that we are a little bit misaligned on how we want to do things. Because, for example, the team is trying to write unit tests, but you very seldom write unit tests. Is there a reason for that? And then you listen to them. And if their reasons are good, you talk to them and you sort of rationally discuss the thing. And if there's an issue where usually because this gets increasingly like more difficult, the more they resist. And finally, because usually they will listen at this point, because now you're actually talking directly to them. But if we get to step 3, where it's at the point where they are not changing their behavior in any way, or like they're actually just continuously fucking up to the point where you can't ignore it anymore, then you're going to have to escalate it. Basically stating that unfortunately, I haven't seen the improvements that we need from you, and we would like to give you a chance now to sort of fix this. Like we can create some type of structure, like a roadmap or something like that, for how to improve. But ultimately, we expect you to make a fairly hefty change in your way of behaving, etc., etc. And guys, I've never, ever, ever, ever been at this level of a conversation where it did not end with the person either leaving or getting fired. Because the two first methods are, like, if a person is capable of identifying a systematic problem within themselves and acknowledging that they need to do better or change or something like that, it usually happens at step 1 or in the very first tries on step 2. But if it gets to this point, you might as well start prepping for finding someone else to fill the slot. Because there are some people that I've worked with where they will not do what is necessary. Like, it doesn't matter what you do. Like, they are incapable of changing their way of working or adjusting to the company environment, etc., etc., for whatever reason. And then it's better for you, instead of having this friction, to simply replace them with somebody else. So what I want you to take away from this is that I've had a few uncomfortable talks with engineers, everything from that you are literally not, you are never shipping anything, to that I can't give you a task, because if I give you a task and I don't hold your hand, it never gets done. You've been on the same story for weeks now, and when you go and talk to them and then try to figure out why, then their explanation is that, oh, because I didn't get any help with it. And then you ask them, but I've asked you many times to ask for help. Why didn't you ask for help? Oh, because I don't feel comfortable asking for help. Okay, great. There's the door, you stupid. Yeah, it immediately becomes this really, really bad situation. But as I said, it usually doesn't start out that way. It has to go really far before you get to those sorts of conversations. Usually the way that I find to be most effective is start simple, just talk to the group. Even if you know exactly who is sort of making these things, who sort of requires the uncomfortable feedback, crowdsource it, because usually people can handle things in a group much better, because you're not singling anybody out, and there's potentially a lot of very nice bonding things that can happen there. And then if that doesn't work, have a private conversation and just try to understand their way of thinking. You don't accuse them per se, you just ask them, like, we are looking for this sort of output. I see that this is something that might be difficult for you, or something that isn't really happening. Could you tell me how you're thinking about how we should do things, etc., etc.? Get their thoughts. And if they have good reasons, they have good reasons. Otherwise, you have to kind of continue doing that until you sort of are fed up, or you see like there's no change in their pattern. And then, as I said, then the third step happens, where you have to be really firm with them. Then you go full stick, basically, because it's sort of like a gauge. You start on the carrot and then progressively move towards the stick until there's just the stick left. And by that time, you've given the person all the possible chances that they can get to fix their behavior. And now you're at the point where either they have to leave, or like drastically change their behavior, or, which in my opinion it very rarely happens when it gets to this point, or you as the manager, like you or me, like I am not fit to lead these people, or like to do this, because clearly I can't get the results that I need from this person. And now we're at an impasse. Either they have to change or I have to change, and then it sort of becomes my managers, or like that's where you have to involve other people. And either you gracefully bow out and say, all right, you want to do things in this way, great. Then you keep this person this engineer who's doing this thing, and I'll go and take and do work somewhere else. Or more commonly, this person has to go, and we have to replace them with someone who can adjust to the work environment. Have a great day.